Why you start questioning yourself in relationships. What manipulation actually looks and feels like. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, guilty, or emotionally drained? Like somehow, the entire conversation got flipped around on you? That feeling usually doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes, it's emotional manipulation. A lot of people think manipulation looks aggressive or obvious, but most of the time, it looks normal in the beginning. It can sound caring, it can sound calm, it can even sound loving. That's why people get confused by it. One common tactic is called gaslighting. Gaslighting is when someone says or does something, then later denies it happened. For example, maybe they clearly insulted you during an argument, but later they say, "That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. You always twist things. You're overreacting." Now instead of focusing on what they did, you start questioning your own memory. That's gaslighting. Over time, gaslighting creates self-doubt. You replay conversations in your head. You start wondering, maybe I did misunderstand. Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I'm the problem. That confusion is exactly what gaslighting creates. Another tactic is guilt tripping. This happens when someone makes you feel guilty for protecting your own peace. For example, maybe you say, "I need space. I don't want to argue. I'm tired," and they respond with, "So you just don't care about me? Wow, I guess I'm a terrible person then. You're selfish. You only think about yourself." Now suddenly you feel guilty, even though you were just setting a boundary. That's guilt tripping. You feel emotionally responsible over time. Guilt tripping teaches people to ignore their own needs. You start saying yes when you want to say no. You apologize constantly. You are keeping everyone else happy. That creates emotional exhaustion. Another manipulation tactic is blame shifting. This happens when someone hurts you, but somehow, the conversation turns into your reaction being the issue. For example, maybe they ignored you all day. Maybe they lied. Maybe they embarrassed you. But when you finally react emotionally, they suddenly say, "See, this is why I can't talk to you. You're always starting problems. You're crazy. You're toxic." Now instead of discussing what hurt you, you're defending your reaction. That's blame shifting. Blame shifting creates emotional confusion because the real issue never gets solved. You leave conversations feeling guilty instead of understood. You start focusing more on controlling your emotions than understanding why you were hurt in the first place. Maybe they ignore your texts for hours. Another manipulation tactic is emotional withdrawal. This happens when someone suddenly becomes cold, distant, or silent after conflict. For example, maybe they stop speaking to you. Maybe they become emotionally cold until you apologize. That silence creates anxiety, because now, you feel emotionally punished for expressing your feelings. That's emotional withdrawal, used as control. Over time, your nervous system adapts to emotional instability. You become hyper-aware of tone changes. You overanalyze texts. You feel anxious waiting for responses. You feel emotionally drained before conversations even happen. Your body starts preparing for stress before anything even happens. Another tactic is love bombing. This happens when someone gives intense affection, attention, compliments, and promises very quickly, then suddenly becomes distant later. At first, it feels amazing. You feel deeply wanted and emotionally connected. But when the affection disappears, you start chasing how they used to treat you. That emotional inconsistency creates emotional attachment and confusion. The emotional highs feel powerful because the lows hurt so much. So when someone suddenly becomes loving again after hurting you, your brain feels relief. And that relief can feel intense, especially after days of anxiety, confusion, distance, or emotional pain. For a moment, everything feels good again. They're affectionate, attentive, kind, emotionally available, and your nervous system relaxes. But over time, your brain starts attaching that emotional relief to the same person causing the pain. That emotional cycle becomes confusing, because now you're not only attached to the person, you're attached to the temporary relief after emotional hurt. That's why unhealthy relationships can feel emotionally addictive, even when they're hurting you. So if you've been feeling emotionally confused, drained, anxious, emotionally overwhelmed, or constantly questioning yourself, you're not crazy. Your mind and body are reacting to emotional inconsistency, emotional pressure, and repeated confusion. When someone constantly changes their behavior, changes their tone, denies things they clearly said, or makes you feel guilty for reacting emotionally, your nervous system stops feeling emotionally safe. That confusion builds over time. You start replaying conversations in your head, over-explaining yourself, walking on eggshells, trying to prevent conflict before it even happens. You become emotionally alert all the time. Healthy relationships create clarity. You should not constantly feel afraid to speak honestly. You should not feel emotionally exhausted after simple conversations. And you should not constantly feel responsible for someone else's reactions and emotions. Healthy love creates emotional safety, not constant self-doubt, not fear, not emotional exhaustion. You deserve relationships where you feel emotionally safe, heard, respected, and understood. Not relationships where you constantly question yourself, feel anxious, or feel emotionally drained after every conflict. You deserve clarity, not confusion. Thanks for watching at Mental Clarity Healing. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share to help spread more awareness. Thanks for your support.